Now let's get more on this, and we're joined by senior analyst at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, Dr. Malcolm Davis from Canberra. Malcolm Davis, welcome.
Thank you.
So we've seen this second intercontinental ballistic missile test from North Korea. What message is Pyongyang sending to the rest of the world?
Well, listening to your previous correspondent's discussion about the range and the ability to strike the US, if you read the analysis today from the US, they're saying that already the North Koreans have demonstrated an ability to strike the west coast of the US, including Los Angeles, San Francisco. So they're already at that point. I think that they have still got to develop the means to actually deliver a nuclear warhead accurately, but they already have the missile that can reach the US. So in terms of what message that sends, the message is that North Korea intends to have a capability to threaten the US heartland in a crisis. And that's unacceptable for the US, particularly for the Trump administration, which has made it very clear that it will not accept a North Korean nuclear-tipped ICBM capability.
Yes, so what are the options for the Trump administration to respond?
Well, there are difficult options in front of it, and I think that there is certainly the emphasis should be on strengthening deterrence against the North Korean regime. Now that would require a combination of deterrence by denial, which is strengthening both missile defence capabilities in Northeast Asia, but also strengthening preemptive strike capabilities so that if we see an indication that the North Koreans are intending to use nuclear weapons in anger, we have the ability to destroy those nuclear weapons before they're used. And that it should be a priority for the Trump administration. The second thing they can do is reinforce deterrence by punishment. And that means making it clear to the regime in Pyongyang that if they do use nuclear weapons, even if we can take out those nuclear weapons or defeat them in a missile defense scenario, we will retaliate against the regime decisively and the regime will not survive. The regime values its survival above all else, even above the North Korean people. And if we threaten that regime's survival in a deterrence scenario, then they may back down.
The Trump administration has been very plain in their speak in regards to China, saying they need to take more action in regards to North Korea. Is this further going to test those relations between Beijing and Washington?
I think that it will. I think that China has limited ability to act against North Korea on the US behalf, and I think the Trump administration should not put too much weight on the possibility that China will resolve this for them. I think that if the Trump administration assumes that China can somehow resolve this for them, they'll be sorely disappointed. So I think it's up to the Trump administration and President Trump himself to deal with this decisively rather than relying on others.
Malcolm Davis, closer to home, we've seen China with a fairly provocative move, at least that's how some have described it, with during Operation Talisman Sabre, that war games between Australia and the United States off the North Queensland coast. A Chinese vessel, described as a spy ship essentially, was monitoring what was going on. Just how provocative was that action?
Well, I think it was provocative in the sense that it's the first time the Chinese have approached Talisman Sabre. They've sent spy ships to RIMPAC, which is the other major multilateral exercise in the Asia-Pacific, but this is the first time they've done Talisman Sabre off our coast. But really, it's a taste of things to come. As the US and Australia work together more closely, particularly if the US begins basing naval forces out of Western Australia, for example, we should expect to see further Chinese spy ships off our coast. And I think we need to send a strong message to the Chinese that we're aware of this. Peter Jennings at ASPI indicated we should have overflown that vessel with a P3 Orion. I think that's a very good idea. We should make it clear that we will not soft pedal in the face of Chinese pressure on this. And I think it also opens up the possibility that because the Chinese have done this within our economic exclusion zone, they've set a caveat whereby we can send naval vessels into their economic exclusion zones to undertake various different actions, including in the South China Sea. So, you know, their actions off the coast of Queensland have actually undermined their case that the South China Sea is theirs.
And of course, the British have indicated that they'll show force in that area. Are we likely to see an escalation in military might then, particularly in the South China Sea?
Well, certainly if the Royal Navy send vessels through the South China Sea, I think that will increase the pressure on Australia to do something similar. At the moment, we have Operation Gateway flights, whereby it's a very low-key measure, whereby we declare our support for freedom of navigation. But if there is a formal FONOP by the Royal Navy in support of the US, then the US may come to us and say we want Australia to do something similar. And I think Australia then has to decide, are we going to do a declared FONOP, or are we just going to remain with this sort of low-level gateway flights? In terms of escalation, I think that it's not in the Chinese interest to escalate things unnecessarily. But the risk is of unwanted or unexpected escalation, perhaps with Chinese fishing fleets or Chinese Coast Guard vessels that could get out of hand. So we need to be aware of that.
And how would you describe Australia's reaction to the Chinese observation of what was going on with Talisman Sabre, with the Foreign Minister Julie Bishop saying that China had the right to sail close to Australian waters while remaining in international waters, while the Defence Minister, Maurice Payne, said that Australia had been keeping a close eye on the Chinese?
Well, certainly we would have seen that ship coming. We have the surveillance systems such as Dawn, maritime patrol aircraft, that we would have noted that that ship was on its way, and we also would have got intelligence from the US. So we knew they were coming. But obviously diplomatic sensitivities, particularly with a visit by the PLA commander, we decided not to publicise it ahead of time. But I think that it does send a message that the Chinese are operating in our region. We should expect the Chinese Navy to operate closer to Australia in the future, particularly closer to Darwin, through what's known as the Lombok-Makassar Strait. And we should expect a Chinese naval presence off our coast. That's going to be part and parcel of China's gradual expansion of its naval capabilities to be able to project power into the Indian Ocean.
Malcolm Davis from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.